It is technically still in Arsenal's hands, but that means that they have to beat Manchester City on Wednesday. Leanne Sanderson and Darren Lewis are here. Before we get their thoughts on what is a huge game on Wednesday and what's set to be a really tight title race, here's someone else who wanted to get a word in.
Obviously, I was on the flight last night and, you know, people kept coming up to me on the plane showing me that we're 1-0 down, we're 2-0 down. You know, we're 2-1, we're 3-1, 3-2, 3-3. This is exciting stuff. Of course, I can understand the disappointment, you know, the two 2-0ers. Yes, we dropped points in those. Yes, Southampton. Yes, we've dropped points. But this is a run-in. This is what's going to happen. This is our young team with injuries that we're dealing with and we're still top. Everybody's acting like it's done. It's not done. It's not done until this is mathematically done.
It's not done. And Arsenal are still 5 points clear at the top of the table. But those 3 games, this is what I find extraordinary, is that there is this perception that that's it. 3 games and Arsenal's title chances have been absolutely blown to pieces, and they are on the back foot now. Yeah. But just how far ahead they were, that they can drop points in 3 successive games and still have a 5-point advantage. And even if City have got a game in hand, that would be a 2-point advantage. Yeah,
I mean, people are getting carried away a little bit. You look 10 games unbeaten on a really good run. I think the Liverpool result, you kind of take it. You go 2-0 up at Anfield, they claw it back, and at the end, Arsenal are hanging on. But of course, the West Ham and the Southampton results, you would have expected 6 points from that. I certainly would have, especially at the Southampton at home Emirates. It doesn't happen, and nerves are creeping in. But as you said there, they've had a fantastic season. They've not fallen off a cliff by any stretch of the imagination, because that's always the word about Arsenal. When's it going to happen? It's going to happen at some stage. They're going to fall apart. They still haven't. They're still fighting. And even as Wrighty was saying there, yes, it's going to be difficult. Manchester City are one of the best teams on the planet. But Arsenal have got to take confidence from that and go there and win. I've seen Brentford do it. They went there. No one gave them a prayer's chance. They got a result there. So Arsenal have got to believe in what they're doing. And I know the clean sheets are issue at the minute, because there was one stage you weren't conceding any goals. Now they've conceded, 7, I think, in the last 3 games, which isn't good enough. For me, they're not in the drama seat. Of course, Manchester City are. But if they can go there and get a result, which is easier said than done, then you still make them the favourites to go on and win the Premier League. So it's about one game, and that's what they need to do, narrow it down. Don't be looking past Manchester City. Deal with that game first and then look forward.
You know, at this stage of the season, we're talking about it from a logical point of view. I just wonder how much the players are fueled by logic and how much they're just driven by emotion at this stage.
I mean, you saw the final whistle of the game against Southampton on Friday night. All the players fell to their knees because it's almost like they knew how much of an opportunity that was. But I'm not an Arsenal fan, but what I want Arsenal to do well. I spent 12 years at the club. But I also think we have to look at how far they've come. Now, it's easier said than done, but no one would have had them in the title race beginning of the season. They'd have said we're in the title race finishing in second, potentially. That's a successful season for Arsenal now. They didn't even make the top 4 last year. And I hope I'm right, because I've been backing Arsenal the whole season. Since October, on this show, Darren's been telling me City are going to come good. And I think I said on this show, what's the point in everyone else turning up then? You know, if everyone's just going to say, oh, yeah, it's City's. But I think Arsenal, I don't like the idea that they're crumbling, because obviously, as Darren said, you know, this Darren, as in Benny, that, you know, they've obviously given up 2-goal leads in the games when Saka missed that penalty against West Ham. But I still think there's a good feel about the club. The atmosphere on Friday, the Emirates this year, has been incredible. But you cannot, you know, that game had to be won on Friday night. Yes, you know, Luke dropping points against Southampton, who I think probably had their best game of the season. And I felt for them on the flip side as well, because they're in relegation, potentially probably going to go down. But I feel for Arsenal, because I've been backing them all season, but it just, at the Etihad on Wednesday, I think it's going to be really, really difficult, because City are peaking at the right time.
Yeah, at 3-1 down, I was fearing for the teams, or the fans of teams around Southampton at the bottom of the table, because they would have had their heads in their hands at that stage. That would have been one they thought they might be able to get some leeway on. But we'll talk about the bottom of the table a bit later on. At this stage of the season, it's all about, as we're saying, just about them holding their nerve. And it feels that there's quite critical coverage of players getting nervous at this stage of the season. Is there a point at which we need to accept that they haven't done this before as a group collectively? And of course, they're going to be nervous. It's not necessarily a criticism.
Absolutely, it's not a criticism at all. I think as far as they're concerned, they're at a point that they haven't been before. They are up against a team that have done it 4 times in the last 5 years, and they're breathing down their necks as well. So as far as Arsenal are concerned, I think Leanne's right. They have come so far. They've done so much. They've changed the perception, not just of themselves as players, but of the club. Because before this season, and to a certain extent last, there was this almost this view of Arsenal as a calamity club, as a crisis club. Arteta had a tenuous hold on his job. He didn't really have a vision, a plan. Some people were saying to trust the process. Other people couldn't see what the process was. But now everybody can see where they are. I keep saying it, the documentary, the best thing they've done, because it showed people what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go. And people can understand the method as well, getting rid of the older players, getting the younger players in so that they can have that energy and enthusiasm to drive the club forward. And whatever happens in this title race, they are a better club for this season than they were before.
Do you know, I definitely think when you look at the performance against Southampton, you look at people like Ramsdale, who's been arguably one of the goalkeepers of the season. He makes a mistake. That's not like him. He's not been doing that all season. Saka's been Arsenal's standout player this season. The penalty against West Ham, that's unlike him. Missing the target completely. If a keeper saves it, you go, OK, fair enough. But the fact he completely missed the target tells you the pressure's getting to him. I think that's where they're going to have to not rely on them, but they're going to have to lean on the likes of Zinchenko, Gabriel Jesus, because these guys have been there. Even Arteta, the manager, who's seen how Pep operates, they're going to have to lean on that. And these guys, as I said, them two, are going to have to play a massive part going into this last stage of the season because they've been there and done it.
And missing Saliba as well is massive. It just looks different, don't they, without Gabriel and Rob Holding. I think Zinchenko didn't have his best game either. Thomas Partey didn't have his best game against Southampton. And in the Premier League, we know when they're off, these teams in the Premier League, they could beat anyone on any given day.
And they don't just change minds within the team, but they change the press's mind as well, because suddenly we're writing about them in a different way. There's an expectation that something's going to go wrong, whereas it didn't before. And people can say, well, hang on a minute, Saka was in the European Championship final and all these other guys have been at a high level with their countries. It's different with your club. You're playing you two know better than I do. You play all season long and you get to a stage, and Kelly, I've seen you speaking to many ex-pros who have said, considering how far ahead they were, they've thrown it away. I don't quite see it that way, but the players who have played and know what the feeling is in the dressing room, you guys are far better judges of that than I am. But I would say that as far as Arsenal are concerned, they're in an amazing place considering the perception of them 12, 18 months ago.
But can both things be true? Can it be true that they've made huge strides, but also they had it so tightly in their hands and they have let it slip?
Yeah, and as you said there, Kels, expectations change. Because at the start of the season, I'm with you, Leanne, I thought it was about getting into the top 4 and that would be a fantastic season, because I didn't expect Liverpool to be as bad as they've been this season and Chelsea for sure to be as bad as they have. So I thought that was the next goal, was to get into the top 4. The fact that they've been at the top for so long and they've record amount of points after a certain amount of games and how they've been playing, of course, now you get to a point where if they don't win the league from this position, it feels a little bit disappointing. But then if you look at the bigger picture, the expectation was to get into the top 4. So expectations do change. So me being an Arsenal fan, openly say it, if they don't win it from here, it's going to be disappointing. I still don't think they would have failed, because it's almost like fail or nothing. I wouldn't have said they've failed, but to not win it when you've had such a commanding lead, and even after the results, having Southampton and West Ham and teams like that in this running, you'd pray for them type of results, because you know if that's Manchester City, that's 6 points done and dusted right there and then. So it is a little bit disappointing, but they can't lose faith. That's the biggest thing for me. They can't lose faith.
See, I think it depends on the person who beats you to it. I mean, in tennis, if you've got match point against Roger Federer and then he comes back and beats you, well, the guy always wins, you know what I mean? So fair enough, or Djokovic or whatever. You know, if you're in the marathon, for example, you're running a marathon and then somebody knows how to put their nose on the line at the right time, you know. When you're up against a serial winner who knows all the course, I've been banging on about this for show after show, about the course and the distance and the timing and being able to produce your best form at the right time. That's what Arsenal are up against. And that's why I don't think it's failure. And I think also they're in a very different position to Leicester in 2016, because when it was Leicester, you kind of knew it was going to be this season or never again, right? Whereas Arsenal will be back because the foundations have been laid for them to do it again. You talk about Saliba, he's got Kiwior as well, who we've not really seen that much of, but he's a really good left-sided centre-half. They'll bring other players in. They'll probably reinforce that midfield as well. The squad will be stronger for this season. And I think a big part of the reason why lots of people are saying it's so disappointing is because there's a kind of belief that it's not going to happen again, that Liverpool are going to be stronger and Chelsea are going to be stronger and City are going to be even stronger. But Arsenal will be strong as well next season. And that's what, for me, makes it exciting.
I think, though, it's normal for fans of Arsenal to be disappointed. I think it will feel that all too familiar feeling like last year. You know, they had 2 games in hand and missed out on the top 4. But I do think it is different this year. And I think sometimes people don't want to give Arsenal the credit they deserve. Beginning of the season, everyone was saying, oh, you know, they've not played against a top team yet. Well, Eddie Nketiah scored that goal that broke my heart in like the 90th minute against Manchester United. You know, Arsenal have shown they can go behind, come from behind, and they showed good resilience on Friday night. I know it's against Southampton. They should have won the game. People were thinking it was going to be 5 or 6-0 before the game because how poor Southampton had played. But the character to come back into that game, not 88th minute, is 3-1. The game looked like it was over, but Arsenal came back into it. So you could see how much it meant to the players at the end. They knew they had to win that game. And going to the Etihad, I mean, it can still happen. They have to have that belief. They still got quality players. Odegaard, a lot of their players on Friday didn't have their best games. And Odegaard still came up with a goal. Saka still came up with a goal. And they've got players that can turn a game. But then Manchester City, as we saw in the FA Cup at the weekend, you know, if Jack Grealish doesn't score, Mahrez will come up with a hat-trick. Haaland, you know, there's so many players. But I still believe, probably one of the only people that Arsenal can do it.
But I think, like you said, we don't know what it's like to be in a dressing room at this stage of the season. And I think, managers come out and they constantly talk about play the next game. Just play the next game. That's all you need to focus on. And it's not just a line that they feed to the media. We're only focused on the next game. It's all you can do is take the next step. I just wonder, though, in the players' minds, the game against Liverpool, everybody talked about that game at Anfield and how difficult that was going to be and how much of a test of their title credentials that would be. Similarly, everybody is talking about the Manchester City game. Can they get slightly distracted by that when they've got West Ham and Southampton, who are both at the other end of the table, even if they don't think they are, even if they're focusing on it with what they think is all of their might? Maybe,
but going to Anfield and it being a draw, you know, it's the way they've gone 2 ahead and come back. I think that in the magnitude of it, in 3 games on the bounce, drawing those games. But I think, you know, West Ham and Liverpool are both pretty decent sides. You know, it's a respectful thing to do, to go to Anfield. But I do think it's a confidence thing. I know from a player's perspective, when you're in the dressing room and these things are happening, you have to have those leaders. You have to have that belief, you know, almost not go back to basics, but to a certain degree, because they've been great all season. And then it's the final hurdle.
Was there a time when it happened to you?
Yes and no, but I think I was always very blessed when I was at Arsenal. We won everything. So, you know, I had great players. No, but I had great players around me. You're right. I've always been blessed. I had great players around me and we won.
That's interesting from the other side of it, because we're talking about a team that are faltering at the moment and how, you know, damaging that faltering might be. Well, it remains to be seen this season. But you and the group of players that you were with were in a completely different mindset. So what does that feel like?
Well, we were like Manchester City. You know, we won everything. We're the first only other team to win the quadruple. So, and I had great players around me. But I think you have that feeling within the team. You know you're going to win. With Manchester City, you can see it. All the players know, you know, in the Champions League, this looks like it could be the year. They still got to beat, you know, Real Madrid, who are a top team. But you can feel it amongst the team, can't you? They're individuals. I mean, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, you know, they're so good. If one player's not on it, Kevin De Bruyne will step up. You know, they just almost, John Stones, they've got so much quality. And I feel like that reminds me of when I was at Arsenal. We had so many quality players that if someone wasn't on it, then someone else would be. But it's the belief. You can feel it around Pep Guardiola. You can feel it. You can sense it. And they would have been delighted with that result on Friday night.
Do you know, in for Arsenal, you know, you spoke about the next game. I think because the media, and I've been talking about this one particular fixture for so long, as players, you know this as well, Leanne, even though you're focusing on West Ham's and Southampton's, it is seeping in there that you're still looking at Manchester City. So you're almost thinking, well, we'll deal with West Ham, that's not a problem. We'll deal with Southampton. It is about Manchester City. And subconsciously, you don't want to do that, but you can't help it. It's in there because you're reading it, you're seeing it everywhere.
Back at that, though. You say even the media. Social media is even more powerful. The first thing you do as players, you go in on your phones. You don't go onto the Daily Mirror or...
I know, it's Daily Mirror. I was there.
Thanks for your support. But you know, I think there are so many fan sites, fan groups, influential bloggers now that the noise comes from the supporters rather than from what you would term the newspapers, the media, the TV, radio. Isn't that not the case?
Yeah, I'd say media's in all media. You guys, social media, everything. They wouldn't have been able to escape it. As you said, they're all on social media. They're all on Twitter, Instagram, whatever they're on. Is that it was almost looking past the Southampton and West Ham game. The Liverpool one, of course, they're one of the best teams on the planet. I know they're having a faltering season, but they're still with the players they've got, can turn up on any given day. But it was all about Manchester City. And as players, you sense that when people are talking about, right, whoever wins that game is going to win the league. As a player, you're trying not to think about that. You're trying to think about the job in hand, but you can't help but looking further forward than maybe you should be. But they've finally got to this stage now where it is Manchester City. You can just hope that it's all building up to this one game.
I don't even think City think like that either.
They don't, but probably Arsenal do.
Yeah, they do, because I think City, Pep Guardiola would have been looking at this fixture thinking, if we win Wednesday, we win the league. They would have been taking care of business, going about their business, whereas it's been really focused on Arsenal. Hey, we need to win this game, But I think with Manchester City, they're just addressing this game like it's another game.
Yeah, and they're at home and they have that advantage. They know that they've been beaten once in the last...
Yeah.
30
City?
Yeah.
Yeah, once in the last 31 games.
I knew you knew that.
Arsenal last took a point there in 2017 and they last won there in 2015.
Somebody's on top of their
best.
Wednesday. Talking about looking ahead, let's look at the fixtures that they have remaining between now and the end of the season. Look, you look at the Arsenal and Manchester City games, and the City... Hang on, are they the wrong way round? They are. They're the wrong way round. They are the wrong way. Just switch Arsenal and Manchester City in your head while you're looking at these, because City have got this really busy fixture list coming up, which is the one down the right-hand side column. The City one is that one down the left-hand side. Here we go. They switched it now. That's what's thrown me. Arsenal on the left and City on the right. I go so confused then. Was that me? Did I get that wrong?
No.
They haven't switched it, haven't they? Right, OK. OK, everybody, let's just take a breath. It's the end of the season. We're all getting a bit giddy. What I was going to ask about, so they've got the games coming up, but for Manchester City, this is going to be midweek weekend. For Arsenal, it's going to be completely different. It's going to be weekend. And I just wonder if we know Arsenal were performing better when they had more regular games. Yes. And I just wonder if at this stage of the season, if you're looking at the fixtures and thinking, I just want to be playing. I don't want to be preparing all the time. I don't want to be training.
But them going out the Europa League, I think a lot of people felt like they didn't have a big enough squad. And they did. Obviously, they went out. But now they're going to have more rest. I know for me, from a player's perspective, I love playing games. I mean... Any player really doesn't... You don't mind training, but you want to play Benny, don't you? Like the midweek games, I never understand it in this modern-day football when people say there's too many games. I do think there's too many games in a quick succession, but I'd love to play 2 games a week on a Saturday and a Wednesday. That would be a dream come true. But then again, you know, Manchester City, if you are the best, you're going to be in these big competitions. Yeah. But Man City have a big enough squad to be able to, their strength in depth is incredible, isn't it? I mean, Phil Foden's come back now. He might not even play. Who is he going to come in for when he does play? So, but Arsenal don't really have that luxury. But they do have a good enough... Their 11 is strong enough, isn't it? When they're all fit, they are strong enough and they know their job and roles and responsibilities. Yeah,
I think they've got a super squad. I really do. And I think lots of people believed the wheels would come off when Jesus was injured just before during the World Cup. Yeah. And that Nketiah wouldn't be able to step up. And he did, as you've been saying.
During that time.
If you look at their defence, they strengthened it. They've got 2 players for each position along that back line. OK, you could argue respectfully that Holding isn't of the same calibre of Saliba, but I think that's just one area where they need to strengthen in the summer, and they can do that. In midfield, Jorginho came in to strengthen that particular area, and I think in the wide areas they're very strong as well. I think the difference between is that Guardiola has primed them, trained them, kept them hungry. He made 6 changes for the Bayern game last week. Only one of them was enforced. And then he made another 6 changes for the weekend at against Sheffield United. And that was bloodless, as everybody saw. The interesting thing I was thinking about looking at those fixtures was that they were the wrong way around.
No, it was. Do you know what it was? I've worked it out. It said Arsenal and Man City at the top, but then their first fixture, which was highlighted, drew the eye, and so it said Manchester City and then Arsenal, and that was it. Eyes were in the wrong place.
Safe now.
Yeah, but we made the same mistake. So
but the point I was going to make was that as far as City are concerned, lots of people think about it in the same way that we're some people might even be thinking about Arsenal now, failures if they don't win the league. You know, so many times City have come close to winning the Champions League and not won it. And I don't think that's diminished their standing in terms of how good a squad and a team they are. And I think as far as Arsenal are concerned, that's the same for them. City are going to be brilliant because they've got a guy who knows how to do it. Last year, when everybody said, break out the bunting, crack open the champagne in January because they're 14 points clear, and he knew how to tell the players, don't get carried away, shut out the noise, let it go to your heads. And he was right to do that because in the end, the difference was a point. And I think psychologically, he has that advantage over Arteta because although Arteta has been with Guardiola, he's not been the man in charge. He's not been the one sending out the messages. Guardiola is used to doing it and the players are used to hearing it.
I think, though, on Wednesday, Arsenal have to be at their maximum and they have to hope that City have a night off because individually, I worry if they go a goal behind early on and those types of things. And obviously, got off the back of the last 3 performances, they haven't been the best.
But you being players, right? When you do drop points against games you expect to win, like the Southampton game. Do you remember when I was on here and Southampton played Spurs? And it was 3-1, I think, to Spurs. And I went to get a Mother's Day card, came out of the shop, and it was 3-2. Well, it was a little bit like that. I couldn't believe that it was 2-0 so quickly. And I just think when the doubts start to come in, do they come in for every game? Because before, every game you guys believed you'd win. Like when you're always scoring goals, you always believe, going to this game, I'm going to score goals. When the doubts come in, do you go into every game thinking, what if?
Yeah, you do. And I think for Arsenal's perspective, the 2-0, then the 2-0 lead again, letting it slip at Anfield, letting it slip at West Ham, as a player again, subconsciously, it's in there. Oh, I wonder if it's going to happen again. And even with some of the former Arsenal teams that we've seen over the last couple of years, where they get to a point where the race for the top 4 last season, they got to a point, they fell off. It's in there, unfortunately, and you just hope as a player, I hope it doesn't happen again this season. And Arsenal are going through that transition a little bit, so you don't change the way you play, but it just happens.
Well, obviously, Ramsdale making that mistake early on in the game on Friday didn't help. No. There was a few different factors within the game. Granted, Xhaka couldn't play due to illness. So hopefully he'll be back because I think they are different. I think it allows Odegaard to push higher up the field as well. But I think Arsenal have to believe. That's the only thing they have to have. They have to have quality, but they have to believe they can get and drown out all the noise that's coming from the outside in because people are already writing them off and expecting City to just win the league and run away with it.
Easy though. Can you go home and just drown out all the noise?
You can't, but you have to try. But you can see progression, like you said, Darren. This year, what Arsenal were doing, the old cliche, don't become a bad team overnight, but they have to go back to how they were. And remember, it was only a month ago they were flying, So they're a good team, Arsenal, and they progress, but they just need to learn maybe the mentality, get it over the line. And thankfully now, I think Mikel Arteta, when he first got the job, I think a lot of us were saying, how long is he going to be there? He wasn't good. And now I think no one's even talking about him. It was almost like, because he was Pep Guardiola's assistant, that's the only thing everybody spoke about. Whereas now Mikel Arteta has taken his team. They've been patient with him. Yeah. Look at what you do when you're patient with a manager. And they've been good this year, Arsenal. But like I said, I still believe it might be a bit of a miracle, but they can do it.
Yeah.
Erling Haaland going for his 49th goal of the season.
How many? Not many. Sounds like Benny's stat.
Against that backline that is going to be missing William Saliba. We've seen the difference that makes. It is nervy at this stage of the season. But as Leanne says, anything can